All right. Are we good? We recording?
Stand by.
All right. We'd like to welcome everybody out to Wednesday, August 2nd's Harriman City Planning Commission meeting. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Chase. Come on up. Good to see you again.
Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a full quorum tonight. All of our members are here tonight. We appreciate you all being here tonight. I want to ask if there are any conflicts of interest with any of the items on tonight's agenda with anyone here. No. Very good. We'll move on then to item 3.4, which is a approval of the minutes for our June 7th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.4.
Okay, we have a motion by Heather.
I'll second it.
Second by Daryl. The chair pro tem can't second that.
that's
No, I'm
good to know.
kidding. I'm kidding. I think that's right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any approved, or any opposed? Excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate Andrea sitting in on and being our chair for that one. All right, I'm going to move on to item 4.1. But before I do, because that item is up for a public hearing, I'm just going to read the public comment policy and procedure for everybody. The purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form, which is at the back of the room, and present it to the Deputy City Recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. This policy also applies to all public hearings. So with that, I will move on to item 4.1. Sheldon, looks like you have that, which is a consideration of a preliminary plat for the Studio Business Park subdivision.
Okay, so this is a request for a preliminary plat approval for the Studio Park Business. Studio Business Park, sorry. It's located there on the corner of 118 South and Mountain View Corridor. The area is currently Zone C2, and it does fall within Master Development Agreement. Here, you can see this is how the site's laid out. I'd just like to mention as well, our GIS maps have not been updated since their amendment to their development agreement was put in place. So there were some land swaps that happened between the developer and UDOT. So this corner here was swapped out to UDOT in exchange of this upper portion here, which coordinates with the preliminary plat that they're proposing. Again, so this is a 10-acre site. They're looking for 6 commercial lots. Looking through it as for zoning standards, it does meet zoning requirements. It does meet the C2 development requirements as well as the MD. It is in compliance with the MDA. Engineering does have some concerns. These can be addressed during the final platting, and these have to do with the right-of-way easements for the expansion of 118 South. So the staff and the developer are working on making these corrections to the plat, moving the sidewalk area within to the public right-of-way, and then creating an easement to accommodate the future widening of 118th South. And again, there's some additional access easements that would be placed on the plat as well, which will be addressed during the final platting. Again, part of this development as well, they are including a detention pond to support the site. Again, engineering, they were missing some requirements that need to be addressed. They had some corrections on the drainage report, and they had to provide conveyance of overflow to Midas Creek from that detention pond. And And as part of another requirement of the MDA is this existing access road that runs down the east side of the development. Per the MDA, the developer is supposed to install landscaping in this area and irrigation and maintain this until at what point when the city decides to add a trail to that section. At that point, when that trail is added, if the city decides to do so, then the city will take over the maintenance of that particular trail corridor. That being said, staff does recommend approval with the following conditions.
And there was discussion of adding a seventh condition
Yep.
for a requirement to remove the unused curb cut that's on 118 South adjacent to Lot 103.
That's
So
correct.
that'll be an additional consideration as we move forward with this recommendation.
Yeah. If you have any additional questions for staff, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Any questions? No. All right.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and let you have a seat. I'm assuming the
Developers here.
the applicant is here. We're going to be seeing a lot of him tonight, it sounds like. Leads us in the pledge, now he's...
Trust me, Bets.
All right, Chase, anything more you'd like to add? Go ahead and state your name for the record as well.
Chase Andreezy, developer. I'm joking. We had that comment last time. I don't have anything to add. Just wanted to say that we have been working through those additional conditions, so they're not a shock to us. In fact, we've already had our engineers update a lot of the right-of-way easement sidewalk discussion that has been going on with staff and with the engineering department. So we're well on our way to addressing those early, and like I said, none of them are new to us. So we're happy to be here and moving forward.
Okay. Any questions for Chase? All right, thank you. With that, as I mentioned, this item is up for a public hearing. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing at this time. If there's anybody who'd like to make any comment, please step forward and state your name and any comments for the record. I do not believe we've received any comments prior to this meeting, correct? Okay. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for closing the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing
We
on
have a
this
motion
item.
by Adam. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Brody. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Go ahead and have any discussion on this particular item at this time by the commission. Any thoughts?
This one made sense to me. I don't have anything.
It seems to be very similar to the original MDA.
Yeah, there is an MDA for this particular site, so we're kind of bound by that as well. But yeah, it's following the conditions of that also, so.
I mean, yeah, I like the green space in between residential and commercial. That's nice.
Yeah, good buffer.
So good buffer there between the zones.
Okay.
So
So I was going to say, if there is a motion, just make sure that we add the seventh item as well.
To remove the
So,
curb cut.
go ahead.
I would like to approve item 4.1 with staff 6 recommendations with the number 7, with the requirement to remove the unused curb cut on 118th South.
All right, we
Lot
have a motion by,
103,
or, yeah, by lot 103,
okay with that.
correct. Yeah, we have a motion by Adam. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Heather. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. We'll begin with Brody.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
And Andrea.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes, and item 4.1 is also approved at this time. Move on to item 4.2, which is a consideration of a conditional use permit for the Studio Business Park site plan. Go ahead, Sheldon.
Okay, so this is a site plan for the subdivision that was just recommended for approval by the commission here. Same location on the corner there, 10 acres. So this is specifically for lot 102 of the Studio Business Park. It's 2.74 acres. It's this section here. What they're proposing is an 18,000 square foot office building. It's approximately 33 feet tall. They're providing 132 parking stalls, which exceeds kind of, what the minimum requirements are, but this is, the intent is to provide the additional parking for the future expansion of the development of the studio park area. Let's see, for the building itself, they're proposing brick, stone, metal paneling, and stucco and glazing. These are all materials that are permitted under the C2 zoning, and in additional to the MDA, they did added some additional finished materials for this particular development. Just a rendering of the exterior of the building to get a little better idea of what it's going to look like. So they are providing a landscape plan. They're proposing, so code requires that 15% of the overall site's landscaping, they're providing 23%. The reason this is so high because you're seeing a lot of that landscaping along these, the private lane, the lanes that run up here to provide that access. In the parking area, they required 8% for this particular development. They're providing 11%, so they're providing sufficient landscaping for this particular phase of development. Again, now this is regarding the landscaping of the trail corridor, as I would say. Per the MDA, developer's supposed to install irrigation and grass per the MDA. As we're all aware, the council did pass a countervailing argument to stating that any new landscaping going in, regardless if the MDAs or not, they have to meet water efficiency standards. So along with that, when that landscaping goes in, they have to meet those requirements. And again, they need to work with staff additionally to ensure the landscaping they install works with the future trail if the city decides to install that there in that area. Again, they're providing landscaping for the detention pond in this area here, trees made of seed and crushed rock. It's pretty typical what we see in these detention pond areas. Oops. Let's see here. Again, looking at through zoning compliance, it does meet all our standards as far as zoning goes, and it is in compliance with the MDA. Again, engineering did have some minimal concerns, and that was, I can remember exactly, landscaping. Trying to think, I can't think of it off the top of my head what their concerns were. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the staff report, and maybe Josh might be able to answer those if there was any minor corrections to the site plan. Do you recall? Yeah, something minimal to that extent. Yeah, sorry, but okay. Ed?
Which is covered by item 1
Yeah.
on this recommendation. Okay.
Yeah,
Condition.
that's covered under item 1 anyways. And staff does recommend approval with the following conditions. So if you have questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer those for you.
Any questions for Sheldon? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
We'll go ahead and invite Chase. If there's anything more, if you don't have anything more, that's fine as well. Okay, we'll go ahead and any discussion then by Planning Commission.
I just had a curiosity question.
Sure.
Chase, they have a potential tenant in mind, or are they just building and then
that's a great
attracting a
question.
tenant?
We do. We've got potential tenant. We've not signed any agreements, but we've got a letter of intent, so.
Can you tell us like what kind of, not who it is, but like what they do maybe?
I don't know all those details. I generally work on those agreements, but because we haven't gotten to that stage yet, we haven't
I'm
dove
just curious
into
if it's like a
uses and things.
dental,
What's that?
if it's a dentist.
Another dentist.
Not that, I can confirm that.
Thank you.
Got a lot of those. In the
Yes.
community.
Could we go lobby for that? Is that what I'm hearing? No. Okay. All right. Credit union? Is that? Okay.
One of each.
Very good. Any other discussion, items, concerns, motion?
I just wanted to bring up, and it's not something we can necessarily tell the landowner or anything, but just to ensure that there's not like a wall put between the property and the trail, or that there's just access to that trail from the property would be preferred, I would imagine.
Yeah. Go ahead and,
Are you referencing the trail to the east there? Mm-hmm. So currently, so per the MDA, there's a vinyl fence that's already installed that's adjacent to the residential properties, and that's to stay, and then the 30-foot landscape buffer. There's an existing chain link fence there. I'm not sure if that's something that needs to be removed, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, is that going to be removed, or is there going to be connection at all from this property to the trail?
That's probably a good question for the developer.
Yeah.
So,
or his representative,
yeah, I was
their representative, yeah.
It's not shown on the plans, and because it's not detailed in the development agreement whether it has to stay or go, it would be our preference to remove it. I think it just aesthetically feels a little bit better. And you've got the buffer from the landscaping to the west, or to the east as well, so.
Yeah,
Yep,
Great.
satisfies me.
yeah. Anything else? Do I hear a
I think
motion?
so.
This one doesn't have any curb cuts to worry about,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
No, it's an interior lot.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4.3 with staff's 6 conditions.
4.2.
Oh, 4.2, sorry. I jumped ahead.
We're not there yet. Okay, we have a motion by Brody,
I'll second it.
a second by Adam. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes,
Andrea?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes, and item 4.2 is approved. Move on to item 4.3, which is consideration of a conditional use permit for a car wash in this vicinity as well.
All right, so we're going to be looking at Wiggy Wash. This is lot 103 where that curb cut is currently located. It's up in that top corner off of Mountain View. So this is the general site map of where we're looking at in the Studio Business Park. These are the current proposed elevations. And so we have the same finishes that we saw in our last project with brick, stone, stucco, and glazing. As Sheldon said, these are all approved by our city code as well as the MDA. We have our 4 parking stalls that are required for 3 employees as well as an ADA access. And then the building is 4,686 square feet and roughly 26 feet tall. Something super exciting about this plan is that it has 46% landscaping. So here's the plat just showing where lot 103 is. This is our current site plan, so you can see the traffic is coming in through the Studio Business Park, heading up towards 118th, and then will be coming out. This means that the drier side or the noisy side of this car wash will be facing towards the interior of the business park and not towards any residential. This is our super awesome landscape plan. I just want to give it a shout out really quick. Thank you. So here we were talking about how we're going to dedicate part of these parcels to the city and then create that right-of-way easement. And in doing so, because this lot is not perfectly square, the west side towards Mountain View corridor has plenty of space. However, as you go east, we are starting to lose that 20-foot landscape buffer. So we are asking for a waiver of strict compliance due to the topography of the site. It's a large drop-off, so the site itself is sunken down. And because we are not interested in adding a berm to reduce that to 15 feet, we would like to ask for excessive landscaping in that area. So either a hedge or a couple more layered plants, just to help mitigate that loss of distance. And we are recommending approval with these 3 conditions.
So I guess a question I have with all that landscaping, there's a future planned widening on 118th South as well. I guess at that point, when some of that landscaping is removed due to the roadway improvement, because of the roadway improvements, that landscaping would not need to be replaced. Is that correct? Or improved because of the loss that would happen with a widening. Is that correct? So right now, it's you know, you've got this buffer and things like that, but once that future improvement takes place on 118th, what then is the requirement for the landscaping? Or is it because it's being impacted by a public project that it's
Grandfathered.
well, it's no longer, I think I'm asking my own question here, or answering my own question here, but I believe, you know, yeah.
The way I anticipated it, there's a large slope there. It's like 16 feet difference.
Yeah.
So if that sidewalk gets pushed out to the south, that slope's gonna get steeper, there's gonna need to be a vertical wall. So I anticipate there will be some type of guardrail or railing there, which would, landscaping wouldn't be replaced at that point, it'd be too
Yep.
steep.
Right, okay.
And to go back to your comment you made, so the reason they're asking for the waivers to compliance, so when that road expansion does come in, the lot stays legal and conforming.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the reason
exactly.
behind it.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for Lauren?
We're getting a few car washes here in the city. Do you know the mechanics on them? Is the water recirculated that's going through the wash?
I don't know that.
Well, that's the developer's representative. Oh,
Beautiful, all right.
well, that's, yeah, no, yeah, that's great. We'll go ahead and ask, go ahead and come up, state your name and be recognized, and feel free to answer the question and provide any additional information you'd like.
Yeah, my name is Brent Wignall. I'm the developer on this project and was the one of the originating founders of Wiggy Wash here in Utah. On the water reclamation issue, yes, we do install. There in the stacking, we've got 4 separate tanks that are running through baffles, separating out sedimentation and everything, and then it runs through a reclaim system, taking it down to less than 5 microns is the limit on that. So 90% of the water is recycled, reused within the front half of the tunnel. The 10% we lose from evaporation of what carries out on the vehicle out into the driveways and stuff.
Oh, that's great. Didn't know that.
So none of it really ends up in the retention pond?
No, sir. That would all be from storm that would run off the asphalt and parking lot that would make its way there from our facility.
While you have the mic, is there any additional information you'd like to share with us about this development?
No, I mean, it's, we're really excited to be coming up here into the Salt Lake. We originated there in Utah County, and I think it's a prime neighborhood and development for a location like this. I do recognize and realize that a lot of cities, because Utah is such a hot spot for car washes, that they're feeling overwhelmed and bombarded, when in reality our ratios are about 15 to 20,000 people per tunnel is what we found that the industry can sustain across the country with our other locations. And we're well, Harriman and this whole area, especially with the development of Daybreak continuing, the new ballpark coming in, things like that, it's well over that stated reason. So they are special use buildings. I think you can see from the ones that are here. I know Mr. Quick Quack, Gorilla was here. They're nice buildings. It's not the old stigma of the in-bay automatics or the self-serves. They're only open when there's operators there to be able to run it. They're not a free run for all. They're very, I think as an industry, we're very acute and aware of the water drought issues that we have, as well as the fear of chemicals and things like that were happening in the 70s and 80s. And so, we plan on having the same level of curbside appeal and everything that we have across the country, and really excited to come into this area.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, any discussion, any thoughts?
No, I think it's a great project.
Looks good.
Yep,
Great
looks good.
landscaping.
Looks
Yeah.
good.
Is that a motion?
I'd like to make a motion on item 4.3 to approve it.
Got
I'll
a
second.
motion by Adam and a second by Jackson. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Heather?
Was it approved with conditions?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
And Brody?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Item 4.3 is approved. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4.4. This particular item is also up for a public hearing, but we'll begin with Sheldon again.
Okay, so this is for the southern portion of the Studio Business Park development. Same location. Okay. So what they're proposing here is essentially a 2-lot subdivision. And again, this is due to the requirement of adding that access from Mountain View Corridor, as stated in the MDA. Let's see here, look at my notes. Let's see. Gotcha. Okay. I apologize, I didn't put together this this PowerPoint, so I'm trying to figure it out here. So just a few things to bring to your attention while we're discussing this. So as I mentioned, that the right-of-way that's been cut in between those two parcels there, that was required by the MDA. As proposed, is the applicant's just doing a street section that does not meet city standards at this time, and they are currently working, as mentioned in the work meeting, with staff, and they're going to do they're applying for a deviation of the road standard to I guess, deviate from the standard. Our typical standard is 5-foot sidewalks and park strips on both sides of the right-of-way. What the applicant's proposing is just a sidewalk on one side of the road. It is, engineering will review this, but staff is recommending that, the applicant maintains the parking strips and sidewalks on both sides of that street, regardless, if the deviation does narrow the road or whatever, just staff is just recommending that they just at least maintain park strips and sidewalks on both sides of that public right-of-way. Let's see. The southern half here, I guess this is kind of unique because this is kind of going to be developed as one site, but it's located on two parcels. Let's see here, I guess. So looking through the requirements per ordinance, it does meet zoning requirements. It is in compliance with the MDA and with the M1 zoning standards as far as setbacks and lot sizes and et cetera. Again, the concerns that engineering had, and this is something we just discussed, was that that deviation to that road standard, as it says, as presented, it does not meet the current Harriman City road standards, so therefore they have to apply for a deviation, and that's something they're working with on staff right now. That being said, staff does recommend approval with the following conditions. I guess you have any questions for me?
So on these recommendations that here, item 2, on this particular one, has been removed from what was in the report. Is that correct?
It's in the next, I think it's on the next item, I believe.
Okay.
Let's see.
But we're saying that we need to potentially remove that.
As far as the ownership
Yeah,
condition.
the ownership requirement, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we can't require that. So anyhow, when there is a motion,
Take out number 2.
we would have to remove number 2 from this particular one. Okay, any other questions for
Would
for
it
Sheldon?
also be wise to require the gate?
Oh, the gate.
On to,
The gate that's,
So we'll go back, to this section here, the road section here that's required by the MDA, that access there. Now, when the MDA was originally approved, the direction the council, well, I guess the motion the council made, and this is based off residents' responses, that they didn't want that connection to connect from the neighborhood to Mountain View corridor. And, with that concern from the residents, the council did state that, a gate, a fire break gate has to be installed. So, so there's no permitted access to there.
Right.
The gate's just there to allow, just in case there's a situation where they have to allow access, it's available, but, per
Everyday
the
use would
MDA,
not be,
the gate's supposed to remain throughout the development, unless they do an amendment to the MDA to change that.
So are you asking, should we add should you
yeah,
require-
I would like to.
Okay.
Because it states in the MDA that access from Mountain View corridor, wrong part. Access from the south self-storage area to Black Powder Road, as shown in the exhibit of the MDA, shall be for emergency purposes only by a crash gate specified by the Unified Fire District.
So
So,
I just want to put that in the motion, just like that.
that'd give
Even
you
though it's in the
no
MDA,
emphasis.
just that, yeah, I want to actually say that.
yeah.
And going back to that.
So keep
number
that up
2
and I'll
motion.
have you read it when I make the motion.
So Sheldon, where's the access for the rest of the site?
Yeah,
It's all,
it's
All
off
off of
Mountain
Mountain
View
View.
corridor.
it's all off of Mountain
All
View.
off of Mountain View?
Right in, right out, off from Mountain.
All
View.
I'm saying is that there will be no access on Black Powder.
There will not be, yeah.
And the reasoning for that little cul-de-sac there is so if people do turn in there, they can turn around and leave, because there's no access to the site.
Great, good
I think
discussion.
that also helps with the deviation. That's why I want to put it in there.
Gotcha. And as I mentioned, number 2 on there will have to be,
Will be
removed or-
removed and replaced.
We're going to be
with-
reworded.
yeah, I think,
I have a question about that gate too. Would there be a way around that where they could put in a coded gate so that customers could come in through that gate? In other words, ruining the purpose behind the gate?
It'll be a city-owned gate.
Oh, it's a city-owned gate?
I think the anticipation of the MDA is that it will be only for emergency access for fire or police. And it's called the Knox box. They'll have a special lock box that only fire and police have the code.
Gotcha.
So more like a city-owned gate, right?
It'll be a city-owned road and city-owned gate maintained by.
Okay.
And go back to, I guess, condition number 2 here, it's stating on the PowerPoint, it says sale of parcel, just, sale of parcels to 2 separate owners is not allowed. This has to be addressed here. As Blake did recommend, maybe the conditions should just state that if the parcels are sold off, that maintenance agreement for that road is
As a joint agreement.
transferred over to whoever buys whatever parcel.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
All right.
Any other questions for Sheldon? Okay. Is the applicant here? Like to Chase anymore? You'd like to present on this new item?
Chase Andreezy. Nothing really to add. I did have a lengthy conversation with Michael about condition number 2. We're not really overly concerned about it, but I also can't anticipate every single future transaction that might occur with regard to these two, because they are, as you look at the site plan, different uses, right? One's an outdoor storage, one's an indoor storage. I don't think practically they're ever sold separately. I think it's going to be a single sale. But again, just not knowing what that might look like in the future, had talked to Michael about removing that condition. But I think the provision about adding some additional language regarding the maintenance agreement is fine, right? Making sure that one of those parties or both of those parties share in the maintenance.
Perfect.
That's all I have.
Great. Any questions for Chase? Great. Thank you. And this is open for public hearing, so at this time I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. If anybody would like to come forward and provide any, go ahead and step forward and state your name, provide any additional, or excuse me, provide any comment, but again, we would request that you provide some written comment as well and provide that also.
Right.
There's a form in the back, so.
My name is Don Perro. My house backs part of the project for the storage units. I'm not approving that at all. It's kind of interesting. Unless the Harriman City, part of the problem having, it's going to down my property value, having that there. The fact that it's encroaching on residential bothers me. Also, noting that there is another storage unit a little further north and west on the west side of Mountain View Corridor. There's no residential around that at all. I don't know why they're putting commercial near residence like that. The other one is I worked in utilities for 35 years. I'm retired. But my biggest concern is the gas transmission line that goes through there. Also, I'm glad you addressed the gate. If it was going to come on that street, that's going to be an issue, that big issue for the residents there. But I don't, the high pressure gas line is an issue for me because I know gas very well. That's a power corridor. And I know the reason why you're allowing commercial because you can't put residential there. And I know why you're putting the buildings back in the corner because you can't do that either. My concern is that if something happens there, how does he go access it? How are they going to be able to fix it? I know that property very well, and I'm very concerned about that. And if they do build that, and that's going to be a problem. That plan's been changed 3 different times. I got 3 different mailings about it. And every time it's changed, it's gotten further north to the end of that project. It was supposed to go, the very first one I got is supposed to be a lot further south, and that area in behind most of the homes was supposed to be grass, just a large grass area. This project's going to take away my view. The fact that I bought that property was because of that view. I'm not sure if you guys allowed to build to that point, that Harriman City's gonna compensate the residents for their property value dropping, that's just ridiculous. So I'm very concerned about this thing. I've talked to the engineer last year when I received this information. Anyway, I don't agree with it. The fact that you're putting commercial there is ridiculous with the residential right there. That should be, the only place I could think of is where the Maverick is. You could easily put right there. It doesn't disturb residents. It's on a commercial street, and it wouldn't interfere or obstruct anybody's view in regards to their property. So I'm really concerned about it, and I plan to fight it beyond this point because I don't agree with it. I think that's ridiculous. I think it just is. It's just unbelievable what Harriman City is allowing to do in that area and taking away property value and the people who've had that area. I bought that land just because I had that view, and I paid a lot more for it because of that. So I'm really concerned about that. So anyway, that's some of my concerns. I'm sure I have more, but I can't think of them right now. But I needed to come here so you guys would know, and ladies, that, you know, that's an issue with the neighbors there. It shouldn't be anything there at all. It was the reason why I bought that property too, because it had that utility corridor. And I knew nothing could be built there because of what I did for a living. I worked with developers, builders, cities. I've worked for almost every city in Provo area, Utah County, and Salt Lake County. And so I kind of know how things run, and I've already talked to somebody else in another time, city with South Jordan when I lived there and had issues, but it seemed like it didn't matter. They just, like I'm doing now, they let you talk, get it out, and they still do what they want. The cities do. Anyway, I'm just concerned. I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Randy Williams. Similar, I live in the neighborhood right there. My question, so I definitely have similar concerns. I bought my house because of the great view, thinking that there wouldn't be anything back there, so it's definitely a little bit of surprise to hear all of this going on. But I think my bigger question is around, Andy, you mentioned the extension of 118, so it sounds like 118 will get larger. How does the timing of not necessarily just the storage space, but everything happening back there coincide with the making 118 larger? It is really trafficy already right there. So putting a bunch of businesses, putting storage, putting a bunch of stuff right there without expanding the road just seems like it's going to cause a nuisance to our neighborhood. It's already hard to get in and out at high traffic times, and we're just now adding businesses and storage, and we're just complicating an issue without having a solution for it necessarily. So I think my biggest question is around the timing, but I definitely echo the concerns that it doesn't necessarily feel like the right decision for the properties right there and the residential area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy, we didn't receive any comments on this item prior to the meeting as well? Okay. All right, seeing no more anticipated comments, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Adam, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Heather, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. With that, I guess maybe some questions then that were brought up. I don't know if, I guess we can turn it back over to Chase if you would like to provide any additional thoughts based on the comments that we received today right now, and then we can also ask some questions of the city staff as well for some of these items. So,
Well, while Chase is talking, can we go back to the site plan?
yeah, that'd be great.
I respect the gentleman's comments. I believe a lot of those are related to the zoning, which was in place when the development agreement was approved. And some of them are also applicable to the site plan or the conditional use, I believe, which is up next for decision. There's not a public hearing on that, but happy to address those as they come up and as you address his concerns during that. I don't have the specific details on the expansion of 118. We did complete a traffic study, obviously, with this development, including the northern part, Studio Business Park, and then engineering has those details about when that is. I believe that project was just included in your 2023 Transportation Master Plan update, when that'll be widened, what that'll look like, and the timing for all of that.
Okay, thank you. And that was going to be my question for staff, the timing of the 118th widening, do we know?
So the way the
approximately?
master plan works, they do phase 1, phase 2 projects, and it's a phase 2 project, so it's more than 5 years out. Those are based on traffic projections and projecting the development. And so the traffic is reaching low levels of service at peak hours, but they're not reaching level of service F yet, according to that study. So when we get to level service E is when we do those projects, and that's projected to be about 5 years out when we reach the level that's necessitated. There is a sewer project that's going to be coming up that road in the next 2 years, and then UDOT's going to be widening or building the center section of Mountain View Corridor. So we're also trying to coincide everything with that so that we don't build the road and then have to tear it up and redo the project twice.
So
But this project does not touch 118th in any way, shape, or form. The last one that we just
That's
approved
correct.
did, correct?
Yes, yeah,
So I
this
just wanna
one
make sure
doesn't.
This one's 100% draining onto Mountain View. It's in and out on Mountain View only, correct?
That is correct. So
Okay.
So it's,
it's not anticipated this would have any impact on.
And as mentioned, you know, Chase had mentioned, there's a traffic study not only for this one, but for the previous one as well. And the engineering has looked at the traffic and that'll be generated by these developments and feel that it meets within the Transportation Master Plan and can be accommodated as the master plan is realized and advanced. So, okay.
and maybe just to add additional information, when does the center portion of Mountain View start construction?
So I don't believe it's funded at this point, but I've heard that the design's going to start 2028 and construction shortly thereafter.
We are negotiating the contract now. So anyhow, there is a design contract that is being negotiated as we speak. The design will begin with UDOT staff as well. It actually currently started. Construction that is funded, I believe it's 2026, FY 2026, which means July of 25, if I'm remembering. No, excuse me. It's funded for 2027, which means July of 26 is when, as soon as construction could start. That's the funding of the project now. So.
I'm unclear on the details. I haven't
Yeah.
met with UDOT on that section yet. We're working on the piece between Porter Rockwell and Lehigh, but
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to work from the south to the north or start in the middle or where they're
Yeah.
going to go. So
Yeah, but that project that I'm discussing begins at Porter Rockwell and goes all the way to Old Bingham. So that section of Mountain View Corridor will start construction in July of 26 currently, around that time. Okay.
All right, my question. The gentleman mentioned that there's a high-pressure gas. I presume that's what the larger easement running the length of the project is?
Yes.
As part of this, I mean, we're going into the preliminary plat, has, I presume it's Old Dominion, or Dominion
Kern
Energy?
River.
Kern River.
Kern River?
Kern River.
Has the developer contacted Kern River to run it past them?
Rocky Mountain Power provided a letter yesterday, and I think
For the power as well as, and then you have one for the gas also? Is this like open air storage or buildings on it that are gonna rest on top of the easements?
Yeah, that's shown in the next item, the site plan, the specific site plan. It will show where the buildings are located in regard to the easements that are shown on the plat.
Yeah. So there's certain requirements, but
Correct. We're not putting buildings right on top of big
Exactly.
sewer line
Right.
easements. There's
Okay.
parking or drive lanes or things like that, so.
Yep.
That's where the storage, outside storage.
Yeah, outside storage could be on there, but not the buildings.
I mean, this is a lot like the project we have on the other side of the city, over by Porter Rockwell. And they designed the facility around those easements, and that, I mean, I understand and I can appreciate what was shared by the residents, but one of the desires of this land was that's why it's zoned commercial, was this is a difficult land to develop, which makes it fit more in line with this type of
Commercial.
project. But that's a different discussion for the next item on the
Right.
use, right?
Well, I
Yeah,
think
this
the
is-
big hurdle was if Kern River and Rocky Mountain have already bought off on it, given him permission to develop this.
Well, and that's-
So they're aware of it, and
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we ought to not mix the two items, as we mentioned. This is for a preliminary plat.
Right.
So the plats are different. Then we get into the, the conditional use permit for actually, which is not up for public hearing, but we appreciate the comments that will affect the discussion on that item when we get to it as well.
So related
So
to-
right now, we're just talking preliminary plat at this time.
Related to the subdivision process, I think it fits all the criteria.
Correct.
It meets other requirements.
And it meets the MDA that.
There's a
that was
master development
signed,
agreement.
As
Exactly.
well as it meets the zoning that was approved, so.
Correct.
I'm ready to make a motion.
It's meeting all of the requirements for this particular item.
So I'd like to make a motion, if you could go back to the requirements, to approve item 4.4 with staff's 5 recommendations with an alteration in number 2 to say, Blake, you can you can reread that
You ready to
sentence.
reread that sentence to us?
Please reread that sentence. To include a replacement of the text on item 2 to say,
One, two, if the maintenance agreement needs to be, what's the word? It's either transferable or assignable
joint,
to
Both.
the successors if they sell the property. So somewhere along that lines, it just needs to be transferable or assignable to other parties.
and then an additional item number 6 to require a maintainable emergency gate preventing access
Onto Black Powder Drive.
onto Black Powder Drive.
Great. We have a motion by Adam.
I'll second.
A second by Daryl. Call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
And Brody?
Yes to that.
That item passes, item 4.4. We'll move on to item 4.5, which is now the consideration of a conditional use permit for the storage facility, for the extra space storage.
Okay, so this is the proposed site plan for the subdivision plat we just reviewed here. Here's the site plan, so you can see it's split up with a combination of indoor and outdoor storage. What they're providing here, let me go back here real quick, sorry. Oops. Okay. So the proposal, what they're proposing is 115 storage stalls. This is for outdoor storage, for recreational vehicles, et cetera. About 94,000 square feet of indoor storage. An additional 1,300 square feet for an office space who manages the storage facility. They're providing 8 parking stalls to provide parking for this particular use. And they're showing 15% of the site being landscaped, which all is in compliance of city ordinances. So here you can kind of see a little better layout of the site here. So as far as landscaping, they're providing landscaping along the Mountain View corridor area, within some of their parking areas as well, and along this the east side of the development here on the southern side here. I can probably show this a little better here. Again, this is just showing the landscape along Mountain View corridor. Obviously, you can see the storage facilities and kind of in the grayish area, that's parking provided for their outdoor vehicles. And again, that's where that gas easement runs to for those actual parking areas. There's no buildings constructed across those easements there.
And there's a precast wall. Can you highlight that? Just, I can see the note, but just.
Yeah, and I'll get that as well. Yeah, so, well, I guess we'll jump on that as well. So part of the MDA and conversations we had with the developer is the site itself is supposed to be fully enclosed with precast fencing. They are providing that. It would be a combination of precast, and they're using the exterior of their building facade, the exterior walls of their storage units as walls as well. And I'll show you that a little better in the elevations. So on this northern half here, what the applicant's asking for is a waiver of strict compliance to reduce the landscaping requirement per ordinance. When you get in between incompatible uses, when you come to like manufacturing to residential, we do require a 20-foot landscape buffer. In this northern section up here, there's a trail corridor. It's about 100 feet wide between this development here and the adjacent residential. So the applicant's asking to remove that landscape buffer as that 100-foot, I guess, space in between the residential and manufacturing zones does provide that buffer there, does meet that intent. Again, and they are providing an 8-foot precast wall down the entire west side of the actual development. Now, when you get into this lower section here, if you look at the lower section of the page here, you'll see the landscaping buffer reinstalled down here. You can see the buffer there. And that area there, that's where the development's directly adjacent to residential properties. There will be an 8-foot precast wall running down there in addition to a 20-foot landscape buffer. That area there, the back in there appears to be indoor storage there. Further down, again, it looks like they're providing additional storage in that lower area there. But again, the portion of the development that's directly adjacent to residential, they are providing an 8-foot precast plus a 20-foot landscape buffer. The elevations, so this is the building elevations, what they're proposing. As I mentioned, you can see here, you can see I guess the elevations are like here, the west elevation, you can see a 6-foot precast would be on the left side, and then the buildings themselves are producing that barrier between Mountain View Corridor and the development. On the, let's see, the west side here, well, they're both west side, sorry. The overall west side, as I mentioned, there'll be some sections that face Mountain View Corridor, they'll be 6-foot precast, but all the sections along the residential side will all be 8-foot precast. Again, these are their finished materials they're proposing for the structures. Again, this is outlined in the MDA. The materials they're providing are in compliance with the MDA and the C2 design standards. Again, as proposed, it does meet our conditional use standards, the M1 zoning standards, and the MD, and it is in compliance with the MDA. Again, engineering, let me just see what their concerns were. Let's see, again, my assumption is on well, I wouldn't say my assumption. So the minimal corrections from engineering, their concerns, again, are just going to be nomenclature, et cetera, on the site plans, maybe with drainage and et cetera.
So, question on the reason why we want to do the number 2, the waiver. I get that there's already landscaping underneath a giant power line corridor. I understand that. But normally we don't waive those kind of requirements. Was there any conversation to improve the landscaping inside that 100-foot landscaping to at least provide a reason of why we would reduce it from 15 to 0? We've had this debate on many commercials, so I was just curious.
There wasn't, well, as far as I know, there wasn't any discussion regarding that. So it was just what the applicant requested. They were requesting that waiver strict compliance to remove that buffer.
I was just curious. Okay.
And I guess maybe a question, how long, well, let me phrase this appropriately. How long has this been zoned in a manner that would allow this? Has it been, this zoning's been implied here. I know we just updated the general plan and things like that, but I believe this has been zoned commercial or M1 or whatever for some time. Is that true? If you could answer that question.
The original adoption of the MDA was in 2017.
Even before that, though, was it not zoned for
It was
with the
originally
MDA?
zoned commercial, and then this MDA came
in
because of the limitations of the property with the easements and all that stuff, and that's why the MDA was formed. So, I would say That to me shouldn't be the reason.
No, I'm just more of a, more of a history for those involved and that are here and present. I just want to make sure that, I believe this has been zoned for some type of commercial or for some time now.
Yeah, it's been commercial for a
very long time, right?
But then the conversion from commercial to the
To
MDA use.
right, was the MDA.
2017.
Yeah. So there's always been intended some type of use of this property.
But my concern still is that reasoning behind why we would provide a waiver for strict compliance, like what we just discussed with the waiver for the roadway, that one makes sense to me because that one is different in that we're not passing traffic through, we're not passing Mountain View through. This landscape one, I'm not seeing why we would justify that from a 15 to a 0 unless we entertain some landscaping
improvements on the
improvements
backside.
within that, on the other side, right?
And if you did request improvements on the other side or require them, keep in mind it's the power corridor.
Yeah, I know that's
There are
the
a lot of
challenge, right?
restrictions on what can be
On
done
height.
in there.
But I'm just saying that could be something that we could improve, use that 100 feet as the buffer that they put some landscaping. Again, I agree.
That's
there
on
is-
another person's property.
No, it's not really, it's
Well, I
actually
was gonna
city
say-
property.
I was going to
Oh, is
ask
it?
that question, that 100-foot
It's trailway right there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's city property.
It's city property, so whatever is placed there would need to be maintained by the city as well, correct?
Mountain
So
owns that.
Rocky Mountain owns
They
it?
do own it.
Okay.
Having another property owner say, improve your property.
So that's my only concern. And again, I'm only talking about where we go from 15 to 0 to be consistent with everywhere else we develop in. So
I say
I think everything else looks great, but that.
Yeah, I
As
say
in,
we
how
keep
does it
the
benefit our
landscaping.
residents to waive something?
I don't see that it
That's
does.
my point.
Yeah.
In saying that.
Yeah.
Normally, and if we go look at like where the come and go is and things, we've negotiated even more increased landscaping, but we've never reduced completely from 15 to 0. Understand that there is a utility corridor there, but that's my one heartburn concern on this one.
Right, but this is a unique condition because you do have that 100-foot buffer that's going to be a trail. It's not like your adjacent property to residential or another commercial property.
Except for the reason why we put the landscaping buffer wasn't about trails, it was to provide a buffer, another visual break between the commercial. So that's all I'm trying to say is
Right.
we're accepting less. And again, I'm not into people's views. That's
Yeah.
you buy what you buy and you should pay for what you pay for. I'm talking about the city's responsibility to ensure the 15-foot corridor, or 15-foot landscaping setback requirement that we normally enforce. Just like in the last discussion on 118, we talked about additional hedging and things like that to justify why we were shortening that up. So this one I'm just struggling to see, just because someone else happens to be a powered corridor, happens to be open, does not mean that that resolves this property from adjusting to those requirements.
And would that landscaping be on the outside of the wall or inside?
Correct. To be determined.
That's the key.
That's what
And
that's
all
my
these
one
conversations
concern.
about, you know,
Do we have the landscaping
buffer,
on the outside of
if
the
you've got an
wall?
8-foot wall, it doesn't matter if you've got 15 foot of landscape or 0 of landscape, you're not gonna see that buffer.
So if you remember on the corner of Porter Rockwell and Redwood, we had this similar kind of discussion. And we adjusted where the wall made sense and where the landscaping made sense, and we lived within that criteria. This one to me seems to be one of those ideas that maybe we need to look at that piece as well as the utility corridors, because obviously you're limited, right? But I do think some type of reasoning of why we want to go from 15 to 0.
That could be,
Just
that,
say, yeah.
well,
I
and
think the reasoning is that you've got a 100-foot buffer.
But you really
Already-
don't.
Already there, that cannot change.
But you really don't have a buffer because there is no landscaping. It's open. It's just an open
wall.
well, and I think part of the reason, or part of this discussion, correct, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Adam, but we're just allowing them to get rid of this. If they can do some type of improvements, and it doesn't have to be adjacent to this wall, it could be in another part of the development. It's like, look, we're going to get rid of it here, but we're going to replace it with some, maybe in another area. I'm in agreement that we don't need necessarily landscaping in this particular area, but to just get
Justification of
rid of,
why.
just to get rid of a requirement because there is that buffer, I don't think that's in our best interest. We need to have some justification to provide, you know.
So when we have
to-
another
to
one
get
of
rid
these
this.
and they don't want to do it,
Showing up, maybe we ought to bring the next step. Yeah.
I'd say maybe a consideration.
That
would
is
be-
true.
I guess Maybe a consideration would be, look at that landscaping, the buffer that's been removed, and add that percentage back somewhere else on the site.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
yeah,
you brought
for
up a
me, I
good
think
point. Let's, thank you, Jackson, let's go back to kind of our process. Any questions on Sheldon on the presentation? We can continue our discussion, but I think it's a good opportunity to let the developer come forward, answer some of the questions and whatnot that we have at that time. So let's go ahead and continue with that process, whoever wants to speak on behalf of the development.
Thank you, guys. Chase Andreezy again. I think your point's well taken, Adam, about the buffer, right? And your code requires a 20-foot buffer between incompatible uses. Is my understanding of how that works, right? So if there were not an incompatible use on the other side, what we have proposed would ostensibly be permitted. And I think as I look at, and I've got your zoning map pulled up here, as I look at the zoning and look at the ownership of that 100-foot buffer, I think to some degree the zoning of that as a residential use is arbitrary because it's a totally undevelopable piece of property, right? So I think, again, your point is well taken. And in every other area where that residential area comes closer to our project, we're fully landscape buffering and adding the 8-foot high precast wall. In this area, again, your code says what it says, but the waiver of strict compliance allows for unique circumstances. Again, I think the zoning, it could be M1, could be C2, it could be any number of zones that are compatible with our use that would not otherwise require that buffering. And so I think the intent is still there, that the residential homes that are in place are buffered substantially, whether we have an 8-foot precast right on the boundary or whether there's a 20-foot buffer.
and that's why I'm not to where I'm saying, I think we need to do some improvement of landscaping to justify going from 15 to 0. And I'm not saying where.
Sure.
And I get that you have a lot of limitations because you got to work within Rocky Mountain Power's property, which they've already authorized as an easement for access for trails. So to me, that doesn't seem like a very hard discussion to do some things in there to justify this 15 to 0.
Within the project or within?
Within the trail?
Either, I'm okay with I'm kind of leaning on right now myself, leaning on more of a continuation so you can resolve that and not be so stringent on do it now and we just start throwing landscaping where it doesn't make sense, but allow you to go work with Rocky Mountain Power that would make sense or come up with a solution that would make sense to maybe improve. Maybe it's the tie-in by black powder, improve that a little bit more so that it does make it transition a little bit better there. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To support the reasoning behind the waiver of strict
So
compliance.
thinking a little outside the box, the city obviously has a trail there. I would assume there's some grant of public access over that.
Correct.
I'm not sure if it's just for the trail or if it's the full 100 feet. There does appear to be some trees planted in that area, so I don't think those are prohibited by RMP.
Yeah, it's just the type of tree and the
So again,
quantity,
thinking
right?
outside of the box, if that's the condition that the planning commission is going to hold us to, does the city have authority to go in and do that without asking RMP? And that's probably something for your legal counsel to look into. But again, I would hate to be stuck to a condition that is conditioned upon a third party giving us, landscaping approval when they're already a very difficult entity to.
But then there could be
We're
additional
not being
improvements.
recorded, right?
But there could be additional improvements within your property as well
yeah.
to maybe offset us.
But when Legacy Ranch was built and when Copper Creek was built and when even this, I can't remember the subdivision's name that we're talking about right now, when all of those, they did coordinate with Rocky Mountain Power. They did provide easement information to the city, and I'm sure the legal counsel has changed and different entities have changed. But I would say I would prefer to wait and slow down and ensure we've thought through those processes and improved why we want to do landscaping, why we'd want to go down to 0, and what we're going to get out of that to ensure that we're being consistent across all of these commercials. We've had multiple commercial properties that have been contested, And I would hate to go into that arbitration process and start over and keep going when it would make more sense to me to at least exhaust other opportunities from sticking with a reason why we went from 15 to 0. So that's just me, and again, I'm just one voice, but sure. That's kind of where I'm leaning on. I think the project makes sense, I think it's a good part, but showing some reason of why we will go from 15 to 0, this city has never, that as long as I've been a planning commissioner, almost 10 years, that I've seen where we just say, yes, we're gonna completely walk away from our requirements and not see a benefit in some way or a justification of some way.
Yeah, there's a benefit to the development to not do that, but we need, as a city, some, offset as to why that needs, rather than just getting rid of it.
I'm
for your benefit.
99%
There is a
sure.
justification, though.
There's a justification, but
And
we're not getting anything out of it as a city.
There's no
There's no improvement interest on the
reasonableness
city's
behind it.
behalf. And I'm,
Right, but I'm,
Which to me goes into whether it's Chase or in the next Chase, discussing
next
whether they feel that it is a burden to them because they happen to be on a hillside, or they happen to be, and when we go look at a warehouse that we just approved, we did this exact same conversation where we talked about where does it make sense to be a wall and where does it not, and how much landscaping. I believe Jackson and I had the conversation about the gateway of our community, and so I would just hate to miss an opportunity just because we're getting a project that we don't completely have every I and T crossed in this, related to this item.
right.
Just
well,
this
right,
item.
If we
is what
think
I'm
about the purpose of the standard and why we're asking for a typical landscape buffer between incompatible uses, does this 100-foot buffer meet the intent of that requirement? And that's what the developer's saying, is yes, this already meets the intent of that buffer.
Except for
And if
this
I
whole
could-
site is lower landscape than any other site we've had from a landscape perspective, like Sheldon started off.
Do you have any further questions?
yeah.
The
I was gonna say, yeah, we should probably, any questions for Chase, and then we can have him sit down.
Can I
'cause
add one
we're-
more thing?
Yes.
So as I pull up your waiver of strict compliance and look at the scope of that, it does say that it's at your discretion and you may authorize it, only if it finds, and then it lists 3 specific things. The first being that it preserves the purpose of the chapter with regard to the buffering, right? And the second is it will not result in an adverse impact on surrounding properties. Again, I think if you're buffering behind an 8-foot precast fence where your code only requires 6, I don't know that the buffering effect is there when you're just planting 75% coverage of shrubs and short trees that are going to take 20 years to grow. So I think, again, the adverse impacts are mitigated by the installation of the 8-foot precast fence right on the boundary line without any additional buffering. And then the third has 2 sub-conditions. The strict application of the provision in question is unreasonable or necessary for the specific use, design, or site proposal. And again, I think we've talked at length about how there's that unique 100-foot buffer that adds another element of your discretion to say, we don't want to set a precedent, but we're also looking at a unique specific site that has an undevelopable 100-foot buffer already in place between our use and the adjacent residential homes. And then the second subcondition of that section 3 is that the property has extraordinary or exceptional physical conditions not generally existing. Oh, this is an or. I shouldn't say it's an and. It's either one of those or both of them. And that one's the property has extraordinary or exceptional physical conditions not generally existing or nearby property in the same zone as such conditions will not allow strict compliance with all the provisions of this chapter. So I think those conditions are met from what we've discussed. Obviously, it's at your discretion. I'm not arguing what the code says or how it should be implemented, just trying to state our position and
That's fair.
Yep.
move forward with that.
No, I think we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks,
I'll let
guys.
you have a seat. So no, I think we do understand the position of the development, but our interest here is to also protect the interest of the city. And so we need to make sure that we are doing that as well.
So my argument, and this is more my point behind this, is if Rocky Mountain Power decided to vacate that property or sell off their property or give it to the people along there, there would be no 100-foot buffer. There would be no buffer, period. And so what I would argue, and I know that's high in the sky, and I'm not trying to say that.
Right,
but-
right. Are you
but
saying that they remove the power lines?
I'm saying, what I'm trying to say, though.
Let him finish.
Is the 15-foot, if we don't protect it, all we're doing is giving the developer 15 feet of their property. I'm not saying I want to take it all away. I'm saying we should have a requirement to offset that in some way.
Sure. So-
Because they've already done that down in the area by the residential, so I find it very ironic that they're not doing it along the rest of the way, which is why I believe we should get, not get something out of it, but to reasonable why we would remove that exception. So if there was some improvement, and I'm trying to give enough latitude that the developer can go and
Determine
think of
what that is.
ways.
Yeah.
We also have a project that has a very low amount of landscaping. And so this, to me, is a way to try and enhance an area and use that reasonableness to justify why we're going with less landscaping. So to me, I think it seems super reasonable, but again, I'm just one voice.
No, I agree with you that it could be super reasonable if it was mandated on the outside of the fence. But if it's on the inside of the fence,
It doesn't say that at all. We're not talking about where the landscaping is proposed. Right now,
No, it
this is just where the developer's proposing to put the fence.
Right.
The
right, but
landscaping
if
could be
they're-
on
if
either
they're-
side of that fence.
Right, if they're allowed to put the landscaping on the inside of the fence, an 8-foot fence,
Yeah, it's like what's
then
the
it
point?
doesn't matter whether the 100-foot swath gets sold in the future,
Correct.
whatever.
Totally agree, but the chapter does not talk about where the landscaping is.
But if there's any restrictions to it, and they put the landscape on the inside face, you're not getting anything as a city.
But they're meeting
No
the
buffer.
requirement.
But they're meeting the requirement.
They're meeting the requirement. They wouldn't need a waiver of strict compliance. They would not need the waiver.
We wouldn't even have this discussion.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
But it's not gaining you anything either, as a city.
But you're talking about
But
the
we do not
intent-
want to set a precedence either.
Well, you're talking about the intent of the buffer is to buffer
That's
it,
exactly what I'm talking about, is the intent of the buffer.
should be on the outside of the fence, not on the
If the intent of the buffer
inside.
is driving the decision, then the intent of the buffer is being met by the 100-foot.
So if we go to our other commercial locations, the buffer does not always have to do, we're not talking about the wall or the buffer. To me, there's a buffer distance. Has nothing to do with the fact of where the wall sits. So in the case of some of our other commercials that I want to, that you could throw out, like one of the big ones I would say is Bullfrog Spas. If you go look, the landscape buffer is all the way around that, and happens to be no wall, because at the time there was no residential or any other use there. So what I'm trying to say is, I agree with you. If you put the landscaping on one side of the fence or other, I understand that. But to me, the buffer is a different discussion than where the fence sit in relativeness of that landscaping. That's why I believe that we should continue this, let the developer think where they want to put the landscaping and the reasonableness of what they would like to increase, rather than us just saying, put 15 feet across this whole property. Because to me, I would think a reasonableness would say, fine, then do that. Because I don't see a reason why, other than, yes, it is butting against Rocky Mountain Power. Okay, we have a lot of other a lot of things like that I think we would establish ourselves, especially when you start to open up Mountain View and where we have more of these utility corridors. And it starts to get very difficult to say why we allowed one developer versus not. And so that's where I think it would be reasonable for us to at least have a reason of why we accepted that difference.
Okay, so we've
will you
heard a
make
lot, I was going to say, we've heard a lot
make a
from Adam and
motion?
Jack's, Forrest, so let's hear from some of the other
I was just
commission.
hoping Adam would make a motion to
Yeah. So be-
continue.
Before we do that, okay, any other thoughts from any of the other members, voting members?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah.
I'm kind of stuck in the middle because I see the Rocky Mountain Power Corridor. It is a 100-foot buffer. It's hard to say. Most likely it'll continue to be a buffer for a long time. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle where I can see the developer is saying it's going to be pretty much open space for 100 feet. the intent of putting a buffer between uses is so that if there's residential up against commercial, that there's more of a break between the two uses. And this use is more utility. It's residential, utility, and commercial, right? So there's like 3 transitions in between. So I get why the developer is like, we don't need to put trees when there's this 100-foot buffer in between residential and commercial use. But then I get Adam's point where it's like, why should we give them a waiver just because they would like it, instead of saying, hey, fulfill our condition, and they can figure out how to do that.
Yeah,
So
normally we
that's
need,
where I stand.
Yep. Jackson, any thoughts?
Well, my question is kind of, I've got one for Sheldon. What's the zoning, or not,
Where's the zoning line?
Blake?
sorry,
Sheldon's up.
Blake.
What's the zoning for which part?
What's the zoning of the 100 feet?
It's residential. That's the reason I'm even bringing this up. If it was
So
zoned
the-
commercial, if the utility was zoned commercial.
Technically, it's R110 underneath those power lines.
Correct.
Correct.
So technically, R110 comes all the way up?
Which is why, to me, you should have the 10-foot buffer, or 15-foot buffer. Or do some mitigation that shows that you've done that.
That there's a need
Again, if
or
the line would have
justification for the
been
waiver.
more on the other side of the property between the residential and the power lines, then I would agree with you, we've lost that ability because you're in commercial to commercial. But we're not. The residential line is the line of this property.
Which is very unique.
Oh.
But yeah, because that does require that, and so, yeah.
I have a couple thoughts too. I agree with Adam on this. And for parts, one thing that was brought up by Chase was that it could be zoned anything, that 100 feet. And so that's part of the exception. But I disagree. I think it is zoned residential, and the reason why it's zoned residential is because that trail is residential use. It's, even though there's not residential living going on right there, it's still butted up against residential housing, and it's a trail system for residential use owned by the city. So it is residential. And so a buffer should be required, and they're asking for an exception. So I agree that if we better have a good reason for it, or a relocation of that buffer. As far as the purpose of the buffer between residential and commercial, to say it's just to give them space isn't necessarily the only reason why you'd require a 15-foot buffer. There's arguments to be made that even inside of the wall, there's a benefit because you're reducing that heat component of just overly concreting a specific area, right? You're creating less of that heat zone by requiring landscaping in a 15-foot buffer that gives more space to the area that's residential. So even inside of a fence, it would be beneficial. There's always a benefit to more landscaping and trees.
Yeah.
Just for an oxygen level, right?
Yeah.
As well. So I do think that there's a good reasoning to require it in some format, or some sort of a relocation of it, or compensation, so to speak, in a different method.
Thank you. Tara, do you want to provide any additional comments on the matter? Okay. Anyone else? Heather?
No,
any thoughts?
I agree with Adam
Yeah.
on this one.
Daryl, anything else you want to bring up?
I don't like changing our standards. They're in
Yeah.
there for a reason.
Yeah. We need to have a reason to have a waiver.
Well, the reason why they can't, and the reason why they can't do it, right? Because they just need to move.
Parking spaces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say, is we have to have a reason why we're doing this. So
Okay.
with that, I would like to make
Let's go for
a
it.
motion to continue item 4.5 so that the developer can come up with a reasonable approach of the, how we could address the reasoning behind a waiver of strict compliance, to look at possibilities of landscape underneath, again, moving it around, looking at possibly working with Rocky Mountain to put some of the landscaping in that area to try and improve that. But I'm going to give you a lot of latitude there so you can come up with some ideas. So other than that, I think the project is a great idea. It's just trying to come up with that 15-foot buffer.
We have a motion by Adam.
I'll second that.
Second by, I think Brody was first, sorry. Second by Brody. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. I'll let Andrea vote first.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
And Brody?
Yes.
All right, that item is continued. We'll look forward to hearing more about that in the future. Any comments from any member of the commission at this time on anything? Okay, seeing none, next week will be our next city council meeting, next Wednesday, and 2 weeks from today, we'll be having our next planning commission meeting. With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
Motion by Heather. I'm reading the guidelines here, sorry. Heather motion and a second by Jackson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
So remember how we talked about the helicopters?
Yeah.
The helipads?
Yeah.